This is the evolution of hieratic and demotic scripts, the 3,000-year story of a single family of handwriting that stayed alive in ancient Egypt longer than the distance between us and the pyramids of Giza. Not the carved hieroglyphs on the temple walls, the fast, flowing, everyday cursive that scribes actually used to run a civilization. This is the complete timeline of that script, where it was born, how it mutated stage by stage, and the exact year the ink finally ran dry most. Most people picture Egyptian writing as neat rows of birds and eyes chiseled into granite. But those monuments were the billboards, the public face. The real work happened in ink, at speed, by hand, the tax rolls, the court cases, the love poems, the shopping lists. Follow that ink across 3 millennia, and you get the evolution of hieratic and demotic scripts, a living, drifting thing that tells you more about ordinary Egyptian life than any golden mask ever could. Miss it, and you only ever see the empire's costume, never its handwriting. So let's build the timeline properly, one stage at a time, 5 clear chapters, running from the age of the pyramids all the way to Christian Egypt. The story begins almost the moment writing does. Hieratic, from the Greek word for priestly, ISO 15924 Code EGC, is a cursive shorthand of hieroglyphs, and it appears right alongside the monumental script at the dawn of the dynastic age, the early dynastic period, before 3000 BCE, more than 5,000 years ago. It was never a rival to hieroglyphs. It was their fast twin. Where hieroglyphs were carved and displayed for the gods and the dead, hieratic was brushed onto papyrus, leather, and flakes of stone, purely to get information down. Our clearest early window is the Abusir papyri, the working archive of a 5th dynasty pharaoh's mortuary temple, penned in the Old Kingdom around 2400 BCE. Read them and you meet accountants, not priests. Duty rosters, inventories, temple income, all penned in reed brush and black ink, with the important headings picked out in red. And notice the habits already forming, the ones that will shape everything after. Hieratic ran right to left, and it was built for one purpose above all others: speed. By the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, hieratic hit its classical stride. Scribes disciplined it into tidy horizontal lines, and it became the vehicle for Egypt's golden age of literature, the story of Sinuhe, the biting satire of the trades, which mocks every profession to convince a boy that scribe is the only life worth having. The Rhind mathematical papyrus, with its fractions and geometry problems, copied by a scribe named Ames from an even older master text, all hieratic. This was bookhand at its most beautiful, legible, elegant, every sign still recognizably descended from its parent hieroglyph. If the script had a peak of grace, this was it. The Middle Kingdom also fixed hieratic's shape for good. Scribes abandoned the older vertical columns and settled into horizontal lines running right to left, the layout the script would keep for the rest of its long life. And it wasn't only luxury papyrus. Egyptians drafted, practiced, and doodled on ostraca, cheap flakes of limestone and broken pottery, and thousands survive, handing us the unguarded, everyday handwriting of ordinary working scribes, not just the showpieces. And literacy itself was rare. Likely only a small fraction of Egyptians could read and write at all, which made the scribe a figure of genuine power. To master hieratic was to hold the keys to the entire administration. Then came the New Kingdom, Egypt's imperial age from around 1550 BCE, and hieratic split in two. On one side, a careful, upright literary hand reserved for religious roles and the books of the dead. The full title, The Book of Going Forth by Day, painted with precision by temple specialists. On the other, a faster, looser business hand for the letters and ledgers that governed an empire. And we can read the drama in that business hand directly. The tomb robbery papyri, like the Abbot papyrus, part of a cluster that includes the Turin papyrus on tomb robberies from the reign of Ramesses IX, record real police investigations into the looting of royal graves, written in rapid cursive hieratic by clerks taking testimony in real time. By now, the spoken language itself had moved on. Scholars call this stage Late Egyptian, and the everyday hand was already sprinting ahead of the careful one. That widening gap is exactly where the script's next mutation was waiting to happen. When central power collapsed after the New Kingdom, Egypt fractured into the Third Intermediate Period, roughly 1069 to 664 BCE. Libyan-descended kings ruled the north. The priests of Amun ran the south from Thebes, and the script fractured right along with the country. In the south, in the artisan villages and administrative offices of places like Deir el-Medina, long the heartland of the working document tradition, that fast business hand curdled into something scholars now call abnormal hieratic, a knotted, heavily ligatured, almost private shorthand used for legal and business documents. It is so cursive it is genuinely hard to read, even for trained Egyptologists. Meanwhile, up in the northern delta, a different, cleaner cursive was crystallizing out of the very same administrative roots. Two children of the same parent, growing up in two different halves of a divided land. And notice what did not change: the formal religious hieratic, the bookhand used for funerary rolls, barely moved at all. It stayed conservative, almost frozen, dutifully copying the old models. It was only the working document hand that ran wild. Change, as always, came from the desk, not the altar. Around 650 BCE, that northern cursive earns a name of its own: demotic, Greek for the people's script, ISO 15924 Code Egid. The Greeks who later ruled Egypt liked to sort these hands into a scheme. The historian Herodotus split Egyptian writing simply into sacred and public, and centuries later, Clement of Alexandria, writing around 200 CE, named three: hieroglyphic, hieratic, and the everyday script. Demotic is faster and more abstract than anything before it. The individual hieroglyphs have dissolved into clusters and strokes you simply have to memorize whole. And when the Seti pharaohs of the 26th dynasty, the Seti period, named for their delta capital, the city of Sais, reunified Egypt under Psamtik I, who reigned from 664 to 610 BCE, demotic marched south with the administration and wiped out abnormal hieratic within a couple of generations. For the next 1,000 years, demotic was the script of Egyptian daily life: contracts, tax receipts, marriage settlements, magical spells, even novels like the tales of Setni Kayamwaset, Setni I, and Setni II, two cycles of stories starring a prince and magician navigating the underworld and the mortal world alike. So vast is that archive that a modern heir to those Greek observers, Janet Johnson's Chicago Demotic Dictionary at the University of Chicago, took until 2012 to finish cataloging the script's vocabulary. Demotic even seeded a new writing system far to the south. The Meroitic script of ancient Nubia adapted its letter forms directly from demotic, carrying the lineage into sub-Saharan Africa. It fills the graffiti at the Serapeum of Saqqara, where the sacred Apis bulls were laid to rest. And it is the middle band of the Rosetta Stone, carved in 196 BCE on the orders of Ptolemy V Epiphanes under the Ptolemaic kingdom that ruled Egypt from 305 to 30 BCE, sitting between the hieroglyphs and the Greek, the very line that first gave Thomas Young and then Jean-François Champollion in 1822 their way into the entire system. Hieratic, meanwhile, retreated into the temples, surviving as a purely religious hand, which is precisely why the Greeks named it priestly. So the real arc of the evolution of hieratic and demotic scripts is a story about acceleration. Every stage, Old Kingdom hieratic, Middle Kingdom bookhand, New Kingdom business script, abnormal hieratic, and finally demotic, is just scribes shaving off corners to write faster, and the writing drifting further and further from the pictures it began as. And there is an endpoint. When Egypt turned Christian, scribes needed to spell their language for a new audience, so they wrote it in the Greek alphabet, plus a handful of extra letters borrowed straight from demotic for sounds Greek could not carry. That final stage is Coptic, the Egyptian language in a Greek coat, written across regional dialects like Sahidic and Bohairic, now carrying Christianity into Roman Egypt. The Nag Hammadi Library, those 4th century Coptic codices discovered in Upper Egypt, shows just how far that script traveled, from temple accountants to Gnostic Gospels. And the old scripts died in a clear order. The last securely dated hieroglyphic inscription was carved at the Temple of Philae in 394 CE. The very last demotic anyone scratched into stone was a graffito at that same temple, in the year 452. Read that carefully. The everyday script outlived the monumental one. The handwriting outlasted the billboards. 3,000 years after those Abusir accountants, the ink finally ran dry. Well, almost. Coptic itself survives to this day as the liturgical language of Egypt's Christians. So a single thread of that ancient handwriting, first spun out of hieroglyphs thousands of years ago, was never quite cut. That is the full spine, Old Kingdom to Rome, the evolution of hieratic and demotic scripts, compressed into a single line you can hold in your head. But timelines hide the best details, because the messiest chapter of all is that moment the business hand went feral in the south, when overworked scribes fused their strokes into a shorthand so wild it earned its own name. Watch that next, in When Scribes Got Lazy, the birth of abnormal hieratic ligatures.